Hi, and thank you for taking a few minutes to watch this video as a part of Excel in Case Interviews, the Case Interview Preparation Program. This is a focus topic around case interview practice, which will discuss one of the activities, industry reviews. My name is Pam Schilling. I'm a former strategy consultant as well as finance leader in the tech industry. I'm the founder of Arch Career Partners, where one of my specialties is helping various professionals secure jobs in some of the most elite hiring organizations, including strategy consulting firms. Solo practice is one of the key things that's necessary to be successful in case interviews, whether you're interviewing with consulting firms or corporate organizations. There's a variety of different practice activities, and in this video we're going to focus on the first, which is industry reviews. This is one of those activities that can be useful, and let me explain why. One of the things at the onset that I want to make sure that's clear, industry knowledge is not a requirement to be successful in case interviews. Now, of course, if you're interviewing with a specific practice area or a boutique firm that focuses within an industry, it's useful to know some things about that industry. But in general, if you're looking at typical entry-level consulting roles, whether it's at the undergraduate or MBA level or other graduate level, such as advanced degree candidates, you don't have to know the ins and the outs of an industry. But when you get a case interview question, it's helpful to be familiar with some general things about a variety of industries so that you're not starting from a completely blank sheet of paper. Also, one of the things that I think is just important to understand is that strategy is a study of industries. And so being familiar with a variety of industries and how to study an industry can be useful. And then finally, you're going to likely, in one of your case interviews, have to do some sort of a market sizing. It's useful if you have some familiarity through studying different industries to be successful in that market sizing, because you can extract some information that you might be able to apply. One of the things also, depending on your background, industry reviews can be really important in your preparation. If you're an individual who, like me at the time that I was interviewing for consulting, my work experience had been concentrated in one particular industry. In my case, it was the telecommunications industry. It's helpful to have a broader, more diverse industry perspective. In addition, if you're someone who comes from maybe more of a non-traditional background, which I would describe as anything that's outside of the for-profit private sector, you may benefit from getting some familiarity with the kinds of industries that consulting firms are really focusing on and having this breadth and this acumen at your disposal. So there's a variety of resources that you can access to help with the industry reviews that I'm going to be talking about. And it depends a little bit on your circumstances. If you happen to be within a university environment, whether it's an undergraduate, graduate, or business school, you may have some access to some very specialized reports, which is going to be tremendously efficient in terms of this activity. Otherwise, you might have to do a little bit of digging online, and it never hurts to even think about visiting your local public library. Some of the most useful reports that I've identified, one is called the EBIS World Industry Report. There's also MarketLine Industry Reports. You can also access the equity research reports that are prepared by some of the asset management firms and buy-side organizations. Firms like Morningstar also have a great deal of data. Even when they might be following a company, they'll spill over and look at the industry in general. And then by simply doing a Google search for a particular industry and adding value chain to the end of it, you can get sometimes images or documents that will help you get some sense of the context, background, definition of the industry. So let me focus your attention on the kinds of pieces of information, the different elements that we're going to be looking at. And this is where prioritization is really key. I don't want you to think that you have to deeply study every single industry out there and spend hours and hours and hours reviewing and memorizing the facts and the figures. What we're trying to do is get a high-level cursory overview to get familiarity. But what are some of the pieces of information that could be useful? Well, there's a few things that I've defined. And again, this isn't intended to be some comprehensive research project. But things like knowing the definition of the industry, what are the subsectors within an industry, also the key firms or the different competitors, a little bit of an idea of the market size, the in terms of its order of magnitude, and then also maybe things like the growth rate of the industry, key profit margins, what are some of the elements of the cost structure, and then various terminology that can be used. There's different pieces of jargon and words and metrics that are very industry specific, and at least having again some familiarity can be helpful. And then also you can understand the value chain or the supply chain of the industry, the main products that are produced, also the drivers in the industry, what's driving growth or creating stagnation, what are some of the key trends. These could be consumer preferences, global trends, regulatory matters, also the markets that are typically operated in by the industry participants, whether it's maybe retail or wholesale or on an international scale. And then finally, some of the operating factors. Again, what are the regulatory elements driving the industry? Maybe what's the industry impact of technology, globalization, those sorts of things. So, keeping in mind that we're not trying to become industry experts, there's a few things just to focus on when you're doing this kind of industry review. So, one is to just take away main concepts. This is also where you can get some of the language and just overall familiarity. We're not trying to get deeply technical at this stage, especially for some of the broader consulting interviews. Now, if you're interviewing with a corporate organization, it might be helpful to go a little bit deeper. Another area when we talk about some of the numbers and the metrics, we're really looking for magnitude. We're not looking for specifics. I wouldn't expect and I wouldn't even recommend that you memorize the market size of the different industries that you look at. But knowing whether it's a multi-million dollar segment up to a multi-billion dollar segment, those can be important distinctions. And then also, are there single digit growth rates, double digit growth rates? If it's double digit, to what degree? And are there particular areas that are maybe growing faster or slower? Another consideration as you look at several industries is to be able to draw parallels. And so if you're looking at one industry and able to connect it with another, you start to cross reference and to be able to say when you get a particular case, hey, this might be like an industry that I just did some reading about. And then, as I said, really we're not looking to have memorization. We're not looking for facts and figures and being able to cite things from memory. This is really about taking away, again, key big picture concepts. So let me explain a little bit what I mean behind some of this focus and the information that you're gathering. So I've just summarized a couple of pieces from one of the EBIS World Reports that relates to the snack industry. And so if you pull up that document, you'll find some broad definitions of what the industry looks like and what types of elements, snack food, chips, popcorn, and what it does not include. So that's helpful to put in context. And then it gives you some idea of the main activities within this particular industry. There's also a few pages on some industry jargon, which can be useful when you're talking about your case and some of the specificity that you want to put your case structure together or to ask some questions. So what does artisanal mean? What does premium mean? Some of those terms can be useful at certain stages. In addition, the report will give you some of that information about market size and then the annual growth rates. And again, we're not looking for the specific numbers. I would take away from this that the snack industry is something north of 40 billion, more than 10 billion, which is quite large, and that it's growing just a little bit more than the rate of inflation or the rate of GDP. So something around 4%. So again, we're not looking for memorization of facts and figures. Another area that you could summarize and put your attention to in the report about the snack industry is what's driving it from the outside. So, related to what causes consumers or what drives growth within this industry, it might be things like disposable income, health, how health conscious are people, what's the overall rate of consumer spending, what are some of the input costs, because that could drive pricing. So, these would be the things that are influencing maybe industry growth and profitability. And if some of this is unfamiliar to you, that's okay. We're not, again, looking for you to have a detailed understanding of the industry. But one of the things that an activity like this might help you with is to assess gaps in your knowledge. And if you're not familiarity with things like input prices and how commodity prices change, that could be something that you identify as an area of additional study. Another consideration that you might be able to probe a little bit on are the different products and services within the industry. So, within the snack industry, there's a breakdown of the main types of snacks. Chips are the biggest, then tortilla chips, other types of chips, et cetera, et cetera. And so, this just helps you to maybe think a little bit more about the industry at a slightly deeper level. But again, we're not trying to get into the weeds here. The other area that you could learn about the industry is how the products are sold. So, through supermarkets, through wholesalers, by exporting, through convenience stores, those sorts of things. And this would give you a sense of what are really the different market segments. How does the business break down? And if you had a question about profitability of the industry, you could get some understanding that there's maybe different segments, retail versus wholesale. In the report as well, and by the way, these reports can be multiple pages. I'm just highlighting a few things that I think could be useful. But one of the things that the industry reports will often talk about are the keys to success. So, what it is that a industry competitor must do to succeed. And again, this might help you to understand drivers so that when you're dealing with a case, you could think about some of those things. Let's say, for example, that you received a case and it had to do with industry profitability. These might be some of the factors that you could rely upon. And then finally, there's some information about cost breakdowns. Again, don't memorize the numbers. That's not what we're aiming for here. But to give a sense of where the top cost elements are. And so in the snack industry, the overall profitability is something around 7 to 8%. Wages are a big piece of the cost structure, but it's not the most significant piece. The inputs, the raw materials, are the most significant cost. And then probably there's marketing spending in there and some other dimensions. So this just helps you. And also, when we think about other industries, it's a nice place to be able to compare and contrast. And so, if you again had a profitability question, probably one of the high priority areas would be to look at the cost structure of the raw materials or the ingredients that would go into a product like a snack food. So, taking all that into consideration, how could you go about your practice now and incorporate industry reviews? So, one of the first steps, obviously, find one of these industry reports. If you're on a campus, go and talk to your librarian and ask for this type of business research report. Then I would spend 15 to 30 minutes or so after you've selected an industry that you want to review and skim through the report. Again, we're not trying to memorize, we're not trying to go and become an expert in the industry, but a nice starting point is a cursory review. Then think about how you want to organize some of your notes, because this is a great way to create a structure for your note taking. And then as you go back through and review some of that information, you can organize your notes. Once you've had a chance to review an industry, two industry, three industries, whatever makes sense for you, think about how you can apply this as you're doing other practice elements for your case preparation. Maybe there's a market sizing problem and it relates to an industry that you've recently reviewed. So Then when you work on a case and maybe you're doing a case structure, again, go back and think about some of this industry information. So this becomes an ongoing part of your preparation, and maybe after a little bit of time you're able to review 15 or 20 different industries at that right level of depth. And again, I've said it a few times, but I think it's worth mentioning. I'm not encouraging you to become a subject matter expert in an industry. What we're hoping to do here is to have a degree of familiarity so that when you get a case problem that focuses on any industry, because they could come from just about any place that a consultant has interest or that perhaps their client work is given attention to, you're just ready. You have some familiarity, again, that gives you a little bit of confidence to go forward. Thank you for taking a few minutes to learn about one of the solo practice activities, industry reviews. Please check out the other case practice videos that will continue to help you with your case preparation focused on solo practice activities.